So what we've got here is an XTM air compressor. I'll put all the specifications and that sort of stuff up on the screen for you so you can see it too. And basically it's a portable device where you can take it out of the carry bag that it comes with. It costs about $100, and it all comes out of the bag pretty easily and ready for you to go like that. But there's a lot of cables and a lot of things kind of getting in the way. So hopefully I can kind of make part of it a little bit more portable so that we're not having to do this every time we just want to get out and quickly use the air compressor. The plan is to put some Anderson plugs on here. I'll need to put some Anderson plugs, or a Anderson plug, sorry, on the ute. So that's the first thing I have to do. At the moment it has one on there, but it's not installed correctly, and I'll show you in a second that it is quite broken. So that's the first thing that we'll have to do, is to probably fix the Anderson plug on the car first, and then put it onto here and see if it will all work. So before we do that though, we've got to check to see if this thing actually works with the 12 volts. I'm gonna see if it can work out of the back of the tray, because that's where I'm hoping to use it. And that's going to be the first thing that we'll do. So see if we can get this running out of the back of the tray.
So the first job was to remove the old Anderson plug, and you can see that one of the wires had already been pulled off the terminal, and the other one needed to be taken out of the old Anderson plug and chopped. So I chopped the old frayed wire and stripped both of them so that we're left with some fresh, clean wires to put into the new terminals. The next thing I had to do was try and test to make sure that the compressor works and I am getting 12 volts. I did test that I had 12 volts with a voltmeter, and that worked well. Next thing I did was I chopped the wires to the clips because I don't need them anymore, because I'll be putting them into the new Anderson plugs with the terminals. As you can see after I've chopped this here, that you'll see that where the welds are, where the solder is, not all of the wire is actually making contact with the terminal that would attach normally. So by doing it the way that we're doing it now with the Anderson plug, it's actually probably going to get more current because of a better connection. So here I'm filling up the butane torch so that we can use that for the pool soldering. And I had some difficulties finding the right nozzle, but I ended up finding the right one in the end. It's just that the nozzle wasn't pushed all the way onto the can. So it wasn't actually, the butane was actually getting out from behind the nozzle, and it wasn't actually even going into the torch itself. So now it's time to get the Anderson plug and the terminals ready. And to do that, the first thing I have to do is to strip the wires. So to do that, I got the terminal and I measured it up roughly to the wires to make sure I'm not chopping any more off than I need to. So there's not any unnecessarily exposed wires. A good tip if you don't have a vise or bench vise is that you can use the clips from the 12 volt that you will no longer require, just like I'm doing here, and it will keep them upright. So here I'm just testing, make sure that everything's all good. I'm getting the solder ready so that we can begin the pool soldering. Now with the pool soldering, guys, it's very important that you use the heat to heat up the outside, and it's better to heat it down the bottom, because if the flame gets too close to the inside of the solder, it will catch fire, which isn't a big deal, but it just takes a bit of time and a bit of extra time to wait for that to go down. So it's better to heat it up lower and then making sure that the solder is going into the terminal, not on the outside of it, which I did a couple of times. Now you'll see here that I did make a mistake here, because I want to put in all the mistakes that I made just so I can show you that I didn't put enough solder into here, and I only realized that afterwards when there was a lot of space. And I tried to put some more solder in just from the outside, but it was turning into a mess. So I decided to just heat it up, take it out, put some more solder in there, and then I can put the wire back in there once I was finished. Then I was ready to put the wire back into the terminal. now that I had fixed up and kind of got a gauge for how much solder I needed in there. Then it was just a matter of just waiting for it to dry, waiting for it to set, and then we can just do the exact same for the other side. One more tip I'd like to give you guys if you are doing the pull soldering is that some people said to fill it up halfway in the terminal, but I found that it was still not quite as secure as it could have been. So I ended up filling it closer to about 3/4 of the way to the top, and it still wasn't overflowing out of the top. So I think that 3/4 is, or close to it, is probably a better measurement as opposed to half, because it didn't feel very secure. So now it's just a matter of just putting the terminals into the plugs. I did use some pictures for reference. You can just find those on Google. Just have a look at some Anderson plugs with terminals in them. But you'll see here that I've got the top kind of facing the rounded part. So kind of rounded part to the rounded part, if that makes sense. And then I'm just pushing them into the terminals. They may need some encouraging, especially if you've got a thin gauge wire. I had enough thickness on the wire to be able to just push it straight in, but you may need to get a small screwdriver or a flathead just to push it in enough. Now guys, we're just repeating the exact same process on the inside of the truck now. So just making sure that we can get some terminals on there to put that into our Anderson plug. Now you'll see that I'm using a mask. I'm not using gloves in this one here, but I'm more concerned about using a face mask just because there is lead content in these solder, and I wash my hands straight after this as well. So just a little safety tip there, making sure that you are looking after yourself and your health. And here you can see a quick clip of how the terminals were oriented in the Anderson plug. So here I'm trying to put the positive terminal into the positive area, and it took me a little while to get that in there. Needed some persuading with a screwdriver as well, just to push it in there. Very important that when you use the screwdriver to just try and give yourself a little bit more push, because this gauge of wire is thinner than the last stuff that we were working with on the actual air compressor. It's very important that you use the screwdriver to push on the edge of the terminal and not pushing against the wire, because you will damage the wire and you'll have a worse connection. So here I'm trying to get the negative terminal in. It took me a long time to try and get that one sorted, because I had a reduced space after I put in the positive terminal. But I got there in the end. I ended up being able to push it all the way through. I do a test plug in with the air compressor just to make sure it works, but I found that it wasn't, one of the terminals wasn't all the way in. So I just gave a little bit of a wiggle and a bit of a push, and it came all the way out there, which is perfect. Now it's time for the test fit to make sure that everything works as it should, and we can see that it all plugs in nicely. A nice firm clip is what we want. Now it's time to see if the Anderson plugs that we used and the plan that we had actually works. So I turned on the truck and I plugged it all in, and it all works fantastically. Now I saved the most satisfying step till last, and I was able to find some screws that actually matched not the thread, because they must have put a rivet or something in there from before, but I managed to find a screw that actually fits in the hole that was left over from the previous screws or nails or whatever they used, and it threaded in perfectly. So here we are, just buttoning it all up, making sure that it all sits nice and firm and solid, and it's not going to rattle loose on a long road trip. Now, the last thing that I did, guys, is a real world test. So pretending like we've just aired down, or we would like to, maybe put some air in something that we're using, and we can pull up, we'll turn on the car, we'll plug it in, and it should all work perfectly. So just a little bit of a real world test there, just to make sure that it all works nicely, like how we would if we were using this in a real world scenario. And guys, that pretty much covers it. Today, we kind of fixed up something that was bothering me with the exposed wires, and now that's all tucked away really neatly, and I'm really happy about that. Every time I go past, I always have to have a little peek in, just like, yes, it looks nice and neat. So again, another thing that we have fixed and have tied it up and made new again. Next time, we'll have to see what else we can fix up. Those fender flares are looking a little bit old and aged, so that might be next for this car. But you'll see in our next video that I have a very exciting surprise for you in regards to my motorcycling adventures. So make sure you're watching next week. I will see you then, and make sure you guys are looking after yourselves out there, and I'll see you next week.